Welcome Squishtronic visitor number 006417. Initiating Squishcast 001. Begin transmission.
Hello. Welcome again to one of these things where I talk at you for an extended period of time. Every single week that's passed since the last one of these has had just way too many things for a single person to keep up with, or rather verify, at least if you're a person who goes to work or has kids or enjoys life or something. Before any one news story or outrageous claim can be verified or even put into perspective, 10 more take its place to pollute the social media waves with more and more ridiculous reactions. This minute-to-minute outrage machine isn't due for an oil change anytime soon. Before I continue, I think it's important to note the players of the game in which we find ourselves. I've been influenced by a lot of the following. This list by no means is comprehensive, and a lot of the people on this list don't agree with one another or would rather not even be associated. Regardless, they are all generally part of this greater movement for free speech and free thought. Let's give them a roll call now, shall we?
Multiple images on screen. Thought leaders: David Rubin, Sam Harris, Gad Sob, Gavin McInnes, Lauren Southern, Jordan Peterson, Stephen Molyneux, Bill Whittle, Ben Shapiro, Pamela Geller, YouTubers: Sargon of the Pod, Dave Cullen, Black Pigeon Speaks, Devin Tracy, 1791L, Naked Ape, Crowded P, Thunderfoot, Shoe on Head, Philip DeFranco, Blair White, That Guy T, Chris Ray Gunn, Nate talks to you.
If you're not in a hurry, some of the milder stories of the last month or so will be addressed before getting into the heavy. Fake news is on the list, as the thumbnail could tell ya. Honorable mentions go to the ill-informed marketing decisions of companies like Audi, 84 Lumber, Netflix, and Nike. I'm mostly going into General Flynn's mysterious offboarding after I throw my opinion into the already stuffed Milo and PewDiePie controversy hats. You're going to notice that there's a theme to all this, one that carries over from my previous Squishcast. All the same, consider any implication made as speculation only. So right off the bat, sorry if I take the wrong tone with the upcoming subjects. I just don't have the patience or reverence. Some of these things are big deals, very big deals. I might not have the Sonic Commander dramatic pauses to give them their due weight, but at this juncture, I'm finding it hard to care. I get anxious talking about some of this stuff and not talking about it, so let's just talk about it. So at this point, you've heard about the smear job these three Wall Street guys did on Felix Kielberg, aka PewDiePie, pretty much the YouTube king with over 53 million subscribers at this point. Long story short, for those who haven't heard, these three fellows combed through hours of his footage to find some out-of-context clips of him wearing a MAGA hat or watching Hitler on a monitor to make the case that he was a raging Nazi and that perhaps this was indicative of an epidemic of rising white supremacy. It doesn't seem they paid too much attention to the fact that he was doing these things sarcastically, including when some foreign guys on Fiverr actually fulfilled a sarcastic request to display the message "Death to all Jews" on video. Apparently YouTube Red and Disney dropped their deals with him following the outrage, costing him a lot of money. I'm not going to talk too much about this. I don't follow PewDiePie. Ultimately, all that happened and all that was going to happen was that the Pewd's massive audience was going to side with him and not with his constant boogeyman Nazi narrative. His audience has actually increased since then, with many people employing the enemy of my enemy is my friend mentality. The Wall Street Journal and these regressive leftists are just digging themselves deeper as they double down. I don't get why they don't just report on Amran conferences, which aren't exactly hard to find if they're so desperate for information or ammo against the alt-right, who are not Nazis, by the way, just white separatists, some of which may be supremacists, but I haven't seen that term in use by them, and I've heard a lot of what they have to say. Point is, if you use the term Nazi for alt-right people like Jared Taylor and Peter Brimlow, you're already kind of off the mark. When the same happens to the alt-right, which includes modern conservatives or classical liberals, then you've really goofed. Finally, when you start calling a Swedish gaming YouTuber who raised over $440,000 in charity to provide clean drinking water for thousands of people in Nepal and Rwanda a Nazi, you shouldn't be surprised when your publication starts tanking, your rapport is in the gutters, and conservatism starts to become the new counterculture. The craziness didn't begin when the guy from The Apprentice got in the White House. It began with you. Okay, Milo controversy thing now. Joe Rogan podcast, the Rebel Media, Stefan Molyneux, and a number of others covered this at length already. Here's my brief take on it. So, CPAC dropped him from speaking, he resigned from his position at Breitbart, and he lost his $250,000 book deal. I don't think it's any coinky-dink this followed Milo's appearance on Bill Maher's show, where I think he did fairly well considering Larry Wilmore, who was on the panel, just cussed at him, and Bill's seemingly paid audience ate it right up. To be fair, Milo did make a dig at their intellect, but I think their response was more hostile. There was also this Malcolm Nance character, a counterintelligence officer, who was all Russians this, Russians that. A familiar refrain. I've done no deep research on the man yet, but I'm not inclined to trust him, a self-proclaimed spy. Anywho, this Bill Maher thing made it to trending on YouTube, where even more exposure was added to Milo's already rapidly rising brand. 2 seconds later, and this whole scandal comes out. A scandal that wasn't hidden, merely compiled. What's funny about this is that I'd already seen the podcast Rogan did with Milo discussing pederasty, or his odd relationship with a priest, if I recall correctly. Joe's audience of almost 1 million people didn't seem to take the magnitude of qualm that is being taken now with it. I hadn't, however, seen the Drunken Peasants podcast, where I think Milo more seriously was rationalizing a blurry line between consenting legal adult and consenting post-pubescent person. He gets into rough waters there. I like to think of myself as a freethinker, and there's no buts to that. The reason it sounds like I'm getting squirmish about it is not that I can't fathom the concept, rather a reason I'll go into later in this thing. But for comparison's sake, when Lena Dunham as a child did things to her sister, by her own admission in her book, she kept her show, that HBO show Girls, is it? And even interviewed Hillary Clinton. Lena was a perpetrator and Milo was a victim with a positive view of his perpetrator. In Milo's defense, somebody in a comment thread made a good collection of points in regards to the messiness of life, which was part of what Milo was trying to say, I think. Apparently, Johnny Depp lost his virginity when he was like 13 to a groupie. John Leguizamo's dad got him a prostitute when he was 14. Sean Diddy Combs apparently took girls, read prostitutes, to hotels in the Bronx when he was 13. And there's a bunch of other stories of people who haven't exactly lost their livelihoods as a result of this thematic recurrence. Oh, and then there's that whole thing where George Takei has a fond recollection of an experience with an older camp counselor. Difference is, he isn't a Trump supporter. Long story short, I think Milo's down, but not out. Alright, it's time to get serious now again. I've said before, I'm starting to see social justice as a kind of low-hanging fruit, the superficial aspect of a deeper problem. Yes, it's totally crazy that legislation tries to get passed about respecting people's pronouns. Yes, it's crazy that a third of the US is obese and another third is overweight. That doesn't sound like a problem, but with fat acceptance, it is. But that's not the point. Point is, how much of this stuff is symptomatic versus causal? There are multiple layers of complexity that exist in this battle of ideas, this culture war. I put it to you that many of these people on the left are indeed social justice warriors, regressive leftists who unflinchingly believe in their ideologies. The people listed at the beginning of this thing have been on the front lines against them. But beyond these leftist ideologues, there's the state, the government, or entrenched bureaucrats, including members of both major parties, who are using these, well, useful idiots to achieve their aims. That failed for them when an outsider defeated every politician vying to become the US Commander-in-Chief. Their strategy has to change. Social justice is untenable, especially with a tool like the internet. If they keep doing to others what they did with PewDiePie, it's a matter of time till they cease to behave this way, or cease to exist altogether. They'll have to adapt or die. This ties into the next two topics, which themselves are not unrelated. Then again, I don't think any of these topics are unrelated. The firing of National Security Advisor Lieutenant General Michael Flynn.
Image on screen.
A lot of speculation as to why this is. The common story is that he undermined the VP by supposedly withholding information about a talk with a Russian ambassador regarding sanctions. A talk itself wouldn't be weird, and even if it was somehow a subversive move, Trump knew about this well before Flynn chose to or had to resign. The whole situation is sketchy. Flynn was an important aspect of the new cabinet in regards to what I talked about before. I didn't go too deep on it in the last one of these, but I mentioned child trafficking through the silly term Pizzagate, which is expanding to be called Pedogate by some, a better term I suppose. Anyway, Flynn was a major player in the game. He had tweeted things demonstrating awareness of this issue. Following this firing/resigning, you see Hillary Clinton with a retweet mocking him and his son with "What goes around comes around," and a job opening at Domino's. Obviously a reference to the Comet Ping Pong Pizzeria at the face of this. Hillary's tweet itself leaves room for plausible deniability on her end. It's enough to make a person wonder if the impetus for Flynn's leaving is as they say. People will call me naive or gullible no matter which way I take this story. Maybe I'm going too light on it, maybe I'm going too hard. While everybody's been talking about everything else under the sun, we have not talked at all about the ludicrous amounts of arrests that the federal government has been carrying out, and right after Trump took office. Over 474 arrested in California for child abuse. 474?
Multiple images on screen.
What are these numbers? This is congruent with my statement that Flynn and a subset of the FBI were biding their time until after Trump's inauguration to start hitting this. Though Reuters reports that the sting was done to coincide with Obama's 2014 Human Trafficking Awareness Month. Anyway, things are happening with crazy numbers, and it doesn't seem to be the hot topic. With all of the aforementioned authors, thinkers, professors, reporters, commentators, YouTubers, this has got to start being a bigger part of the dialogue. Even I try to compartmentalize the fight against social justice and Islamism from this. There are even more enemies, foreign and domestic, not only involved in this, but potentially at the helm of it. All these ideas and people don't exist in a vacuum. The Rebel did do a short segment on this, which is good, but I can't help but get the feeling that everybody is weirdly dodgy yet somewhat aware of what's going on here. Maybe no one wants to stake their reputation on being wrong. I have some clips here of Tammy Stefano with some numbers that should provide some alarming perspective and proportion of what's going on here.
Video on screen.
And the Los Angeles Times was kind enough to publish this. When we looked into it, 1,000 convicted sex offenders were given a green light to become approved foster parents.
Wow.
1,000 only in Los Angeles County. In 2013, Child Protective Services took thousands of children away from parents. 570 children were murdered that were actually taken away from what Child Protective Services deemed to be unsafe homes, only to be murdered and killed within the homes that they put these children in. Wow. Only in Los Angeles County. In Orange County last year, they had a bust for these traffickers. They got 105 people, victims of trafficking, human trafficking. 65% of those victims were wards of Child Protective Services. Not only were they wards of Child Protective Services, but check this out, they were never reported missing. Well, what we're finding now is this trafficking is a lot bigger and a lot more involved politically than we care to look at or the media won't cover. Everybody's afraid because there's some real big heavy hitters that are very influential that are involved.
Image or video searches of CPS corruption bring up no shortage of hits. Seems there are a number of voices trying to bring awareness to what is essentially a state arm engaging in legal kidnapping. Despite a failing mainstream media, maybe there are some good journalists out there after all. A renegade CBS reporter, a one Ben Swan, gave a fair report of a lot of these circumstantial oddities revolving around Pizzagate. I'm super surprised they let him do it, actually. I won't play the whole thing, just some bits here.
On screen.
Media is telling you the entire story is a hoax or fake news. But what does that even mean? I spent the last month investigating. So what exactly is Pizzagate? And are there any actual facts to support the story? I've got to warn you, what we're going to talk about tonight will be disturbing to some people. But this is a reality check you won't see anywhere else. Around 50,000 email messages. And it was from those emails that the claims that John Podesta may be part of a child sex trafficking ring come from. Now, to be clear, Not one single email in the Podesta emails discusses child sex trafficking or pedophilia. That is a fact. But there are dozens of what seem to be strangely worded emails dealing with pizza and handkerchiefs. Self-described online investigators say that those words in the emails about pizza and the talk of handkerchiefs is code language used by pedophiles. What media is ignoring is that the Comet Ping Pong pizza place is actually referenced in the Podesta emails at least a dozen or so times, and that the owner of that place, James Alfantis, is a friend of John Podesta. He was actually named, this is kind of strange, by GQ magazine as one of the top 50 most powerful people in Washington. Yes, we're talking about a pizza parlor owner. Also, Comet Ping Pong, owned by Alfantis, is the place where a number of performance artists perform regularly. Two of the groups that perform there, who you can see advertised, by the way, on this Comet Ping Pong poster, include a group called Heavy Breathing and another group called Sex Stains. Well, if you check out the YouTube videos by these bands, Heavy Breathing has songs that do joke about pedophilia. Now let's talk about the Podesta brothers, because remember, it was John Podesta's email that was hacked. In those leaked Podesta emails, John Podesta talks about his close relationship with Dennis Hastert, the former Speaker of the House, who was recently sentenced to 15 months in prison for abusing boys years ago. He was referred to by the judge as a serial child molester. To be clear, that just begins to scratch the surface of how strange some of this stuff is, and bear in mind, we can't get into a lot of the real details of it because of the limits on broadcasting this on television. But it is some very strange stuff.
Quite the eerie bomb to drop on TV. And it's a little bomb too, actually. He was giving the public little baby doses, perhaps to get them acclimated, because it does get a lot weirder than that. Suddenly after this report, his Twitter page went dark. It seems he still does reports, just not frequently. He's just been keeping a low profile while hinting at the notion that something is being done and to trust him. That's what I read from it anyway. I have a working outline for a minimum 4-part video series covering this, from the Podesta emails to the FBI Records Vault verified Twitter account dropping cryptic links to its government page and other specific information. Time will tell if and when I make it and post it. By the way, this may be irrational, but I feel compelled to advise the listenership here that there is no possibility for me to up and quit making these videos. Even if I decide to off myself, I will totally let you know beforehand. If that sounds like it's coming from a place of paranoia, well, that might be the irrational part. In this Pedogate series, tentative section 3 would go into the body count associated with all this. Mostly people who got too close to the fire. I've seen the faces, I've read their stories, and it gets way too weird, way too fast. Again, this is no definitive, complete claim I'm yet making. I want to present some of the info as I see it, and maybe others will arrive at different conclusions. This is weird territory. I don't want to just start talking deep state theory or just putting things into triple parentheses here willy-nilly. Which is funny because the very next thing I had written down here was going to be about the CIA and Mossad. I've been curious for a long time as to what the CIA actually does and why it exists, other than to undermine the president apparently. This ex-CIA director John Brennan character is purported by some to still be pulling some strings. If this Israeli intelligence agency is as potentially subversive as and colluding with this American one, well then geez, the president has got his work cut out for him alright. But now he's down Flynn. Internal conflict seems to be an issue. Pence and Priebus are part of an establishment that does things a certain way, whereas Trump and Bannon are not. This is becoming kind of a thing with spy games now. Well, it happened, I guess. Reality is turning into a movie. Maybe it always was, except now the internet's allowing people to see more parts of the story. Oh, Squish, you're a hypocrite for making outrageous claims yourself when you don't have all the data. Alright, I get it. Look, it takes months for me to mull over the info. I've been at this for a while now, in the background. I like to see the dust settle more. I'm not speaking matter-of-factly, I'm just thinking out loud. That's my disclaimer. Obviously, pulling this string continues to reveal more strings, which in turn get pulled, which then reveal more strings that get pulled, and so on and so forth. All the same, this could be something that the free speech community, as it were, should consider being a prominent piece of the puzzle. Man, I didn't even cover what the hell that thing was with Ashton Kutcher saying he was part of an anti-child trafficking FBI unit named Thorn, I think? What? This is a lot of stuff. Let me take a quick hard U-turn back to my hesitance with Milo's statements. As I said, I think he's a victim who admirably wished not to view himself as a victim, so then rationalized bad experiences as good so as to remove their power. Even as I disagree with what he said, what he did indeed say was not the most crazy, unimaginable thing possible. I really don't want to be the freaking guy who has to define the different grades of philias, but considering the magnitude of the theme, it's relevant. A quote-unquote consenting teenager is not the same as state-sponsored kidnapping, not the same as sexual slavery, not the same as murder. If I were a pedo apologist, I wouldn't be pressing the Pedogate story so much. My official statement, if necessary, is as follows. As an example problem, two people want to have sex. One is a consenting 25-year-old and the other is a consenting 15-year-old, who by US definition cannot legally consent. My answer to this is by the books. The 15-year-old has to wait to vote, has to wait to buy a gun, despite his or her desire, so too will they wait to copulate. The 25-year-old should know the law and wait, fish somewhere else, or move to China. I feel like in the future this thing with Milo is going to be used as a false equivalence against the right as the Pedogate developments refine their political polarity. Considering how hashtag Podesta Molesta was going to be the new Secretary of State if Hillary won, yeah, I'm inclined to say the Democrats are going to be hurt more. Not to mention some shady DNC deaths and the Clintons in the Caribbean. Establishment Republicans to some degree too, considering the case of former House Speaker Dennis Hastert. Okay, I think that's enough for this one. Remember to check out my other videos. They're short but sweet if I do say so myself. If you want to see more like them, please visit my Patreon. And finally, if you just love what these fake news networks are doing, you can buy my FNN shirt over on Redbubble. I designed it and I think it looks pretty offish. I'm gonna leave you with some clips to show just how much Don Lemon and Chris Cuomo would really appreciate you wearing their colors.
Thanks for letting me bend your ear for a while. And, hey, don't be squishy. Be Squishtronic. I'm keeping that gay little sign off, by the way.
Fake news is the worst thing that you can call a journalist. It's like an ethnic disparagement. We all have these ugly words for people. That's the one for journalists.
Just because of the attack of fake news and attacking our network, I just want to ask you, sir.
I'm changing it from fake news, though.
Doesn't that undermine?
Very fake news.
I know, but aren't you?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Real news, Mr. President. Real news.
Bring in Paris now. Sorry to cut you guys short, but I want to get it all in before we have to go. Paris, what do you think?
I think this is fake news. This is not a news story. Don,
tell me what about it is fake, Paris. We're gonna go. Are we going down this road again?
Yeah, we are.
Come on, Paris.
I didn't interrupt any of you all. Let me just tell you why. The president is not breaking any laws, and he's not doing anything. It's not his fault.
Paris, hold on. Let me ask you this.
No.
Let me ask you. I'm gonna let you finish. I'm gonna let you finish. Do you actually know what the definition of fake news is?
What we're doing right now?
No. Okay. Well,
because
then there's nothing fake about that. Please stop it with that stupid talking point that it is a fake news story. If you don't want to participate in the news stories on this network, then don't come on and participate. But don't call them fake because you don't agree with them. Go on.
Don, this is a fake news story, in my opinion, because the underlying
Paris,
assumption
thank you very much,
is
everyone.
that...
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend. Good night, all.
Thanks, Don.
Transparency, they put them all out. So they're dribbling them out because they want because the Russians are...
End transmission.